Welcome mortals, Brannon again at Brannon Sax. This is my second video in this series, and I hope you're enjoying my videos and learning something. As promised in my last video, I would like to talk to you today about sight reading. Sight reading is a skill that can be practiced just like you would practice scales and rhythms. I call this my 7 steps to sight reading, and here's how it goes. I'll try to add visual examples as we go, and I will play the example at the end. My 7 steps for sight reading works because if you read the music left to right before you start playing, you'll catch all of these little things, and it should improve the amount of time it takes for you to sight read a piece of music. The first thing you notice when you look at the very left of a piece of music at the very beginning is the clef. With some exceptions like baritone euphonium or maybe bassoon, most of you will play in the same clef all the time. So I skipped this step. That would make it 8 steps for sight reading, and I like the alliteration of 7 steps for sight reading better. The next thing you will notice, moving left to right, after the clef, is a key signature. The key signature tells us what scale the piece of music is based on. So we ask ourselves, what key is this piece in, and am I comfortable playing in that key? If I can play the scale of the particular piece of music I'm sight reading, I should be okay. Now in our example, we see 1 flat in the key signature indicating F major. Now there's a possibility it could be D minor, but we would learn that as we're reading the piece of music, or there are a few little flags that we can pick up on the way before we start playing. But in this particular example is definitely F major. The next thing we'll notice moving left to right after the key signature is time signature. Time signature is usually represented by 2 numbers, one above the other, or a C indicating common time, or a C with a slash through it indicating cut time. The number on top tells us how many beats are in each measure. The number on the bottom indicates what note value is equal to 1 beat. In our example, we see 4/4, or what we call 4/4 time, which means there are 4 beats per measure, and a quarter note, 1/4 of a whole note, gets each beat. Step 3 moves us a little bit away from left to right, so strictly, and we look above the staff and see a tempo marking. Not all pieces have tempo markings, but generally speaking, you will either see some designation of tempo or some designation of note value equals beats per minute. Typically, though, when we're sight reading, we're really more focused on is it slower or faster, and how close to the correct tempo can I play correctly. In our example, we see a tempo allegretto, or quarter note equals 96 beats per minute. So we can dial that into a metronome, but chances are if we're sight reading this for an audition or for a first read with a group or a band, we're not going to have a metronome available to just click in and say, this is what tempo I'm going at. But we can identify that it's slightly slower than a march tempo at 120. Continuing to move left to right, we're going to look below the staff this time and see if there is a dynamic marking. Dynamics indicates whether a piece is strong or soft. It's usually related to volume, but I tend to think of it more of intensity. So there are certain things that could be louder but still have a soft intensity, and things that could be quieter and still have a stronger intensity. So what we're interested in when sight reading is, what dynamic does this start at, and where does it change? Are the dynamics consistent with the style of the piece? For example, if it were a fanfare or a march, we don't usually play those reservedly or softly. If it's a lyrical ballad, we may not be playing those at screamingly strong dynamics. In our example, we can notice that we start at a mezzo forte. Now the dynamics will change as we notice crescendos and decrescendos to piano, and then another crescendo and decrescendo, and then come returning to forte at about measure 13. And then it'll decrescendo to piano, and then kind of soft level out at mezzo forte. Step 5 brings us back to the staff, and we're continuing to move left to right. And the next thing that probably jumps out at you are articulations. Articulations would be like slurs, legato marks, accents, staccato marks, marcatos, things like that. Something that designates whether a piece is lyrical, like sung like a song, or separated with shorter, what I like to refer to as separated notes, more like a march or a fanfare. What kind of articulations do we see at the beginning, and where do articulations change? Because sometimes even the same pattern of notes could have a different set of articulations. And are my articulations consistent with the style of the piece, i.e. fanfare versus ballad? In our example, we will see lots of slurs. Okay, even right at the beginning, we see a big giant slur. Okay, so we will know that this is intended to be connected. Okay, and then later we can see that there are some accents and even a few staccatos. So we will need to pay close attention to accents, staccatos, and I even see a few legato markings, so that there are a variety of articulations in this one example. Step 6 has us looking at the notes themselves to see if there are any accidentals. Accidentals would be indicators that we're moving away from the key signature that we've already established. We're looking for any particular key changes or notes that would be indicated with sharps, flats, or naturals given the key signature that we're in. Be sure, whatever happens, to allow an accidental to carry through an entire measure unless it's otherwise noted. In our particular example, we see in measure 9 that we start seeing C sharps and F sharps, which may indicate sort of a D major kind of relationship compared to the F major that we were previously in. Finally, in step 7, I like to look for any tricky rhythms or other tricky spots that may trip me up. Syncopations, triplets, dotted rhythms, those are things that might be something that I wouldn't expect, but I can anticipate if I go ahead and identify where they are. If we look at our example, we don't see really much in the way of rhythmic changes. There's a dotted quarter note in measure 5, but until when we get to measure 13, things really start to change. We see dotted 8/16 relationships and even some triplets in measures 19 and 20. Sight reading should be a component of your practice routine, just like scales and repertoire. Following this process should help you get better prepared for auditions and anytime you have a new piece of music to learn. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at the email address below. If you're feeling generous, there are also links to my Patreon and Tipped accounts, as well as links for some of my bands for your enjoyment. Also, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel so you know when a new video with more advice is available. Stay tuned.